Thank you very much for taking your time out this afternoon to join me in my talk titled See Yourself in Cyber, where we'll discuss careers that go beyond hacking. My name is Luke, and I am an imposter. Now, why do I say that? I say that for three reasons. Number one, clearly, I'm not Ed Adams. He has slightly more hair on his head, maybe a little less under his chin than I do. And Ed was originally going to deliver this presentation, but unfortunately at short notice, he was unable to make it, and therefore my apologies, but you're stuck with me. The second reason I say that is those four words, I am an imposter, are the first four words of Ed's new book, which is also titled See Yourself in Cyber. The reason they are the first four words in Ed's book are Ed has, just like me, no technical cybersecurity qualification. He's got no specific cybersecurity certifications, yet he runs a very successful cybersecurity business. He's now the head of our cybersecurity division in North America for Veritas Group. Myself, I work in the Netherlands, leading the international arm of the Crisis and Resilience Service offering, helping clients around the world plan, train, and prepare for major cyber events. And really, that's the purpose and the backbone of Ed's book, is that we don't need technical qualifications in cyber to be involved in the cyber industry. The industry is vast, there are plenty of opportunities, and so there's two reasons that Ed wrote the book. Number one, he wanted to help individuals who wanted to get involved in cyber. And secondly, he wanted to give some advice to organizations to help build their cyber resilience capabilities by expanding the cyber workforce. To kick off the presentation, I'm going to take you all back to primary school, which may be a more recent memory to some, perhaps a very, very distant memory to others. And hopefully, you all remember your primary colors, your red, your blue, and your yellow. And hopefully, you remember that when you mix a little bit of red with blue, you get purple, and a little bit of blue with yellow, you get green, etc., etc. And I'm going to use this color wheel to describe some security and some non-security jobs. Many in the cybersecurity space will be very familiar with the concept of red teams versus blue teams. For those unfamiliar, the red teams are essentially the attackers, and the blue teams are the defenders. And on the red team side, you have job functions like vulnerability assessors, pen testers, or those that do full red team exercises. And then on the blue side, you have your defenders, your incident operations, your forensics, your security operations, etc. And when those two come together and they practice internal exercises, you have something called purple teaming. And this is where we test the effectiveness of the attack versus the defense. And this is where I spend a lot of my time, less at the operational level, but more at the strategic level, guiding executive teams on how they would respond to a hypothetical, very successful red team attack. Of course, you have your breakers and you have your defenders. You also have what we refer to as the bakers, the individuals in the middle you can see. And these are the teams or the people who set the policies, the procedures, the guidance documents within which the rest of the business can operate from a security perspective. And within here, you have your traditional roles like your Chief Information Security Officer, perhaps your audit functions, your risk and compliance teams, your legal teams, etc. But the basis of this presentation is the yellow teams, the builders. And in there, you have your DevOps teams, your IT teams. And in most organizations, the yellow team significantly dwarfs the security team. Sometimes 5-to-1, sometimes 10-to-1, sometimes 50-to-1, 100-to-1 in major tech-savvy organizations. And the idea and the concept behind Ed's book, and then this color wheel, is that if you educate your yellow teams enough in security practices, increase the number of security advocates in your business. And the idea that to do that is you can either teach them a little bit of attack technique to make them slightly orange, or you teach them some defense tactics to make them slightly green. Now, before we go any further, I think it was mentioned earlier by Andrew, we have to recognize that, of course, software drives everything. Software is in everything that we do, whether you're auditing medical devices, you're building web-based applications, blockchains, databases, or the latest range that we've seen and heard from a couple of times this morning, artificial intelligence. And with artificial intelligence, it's not only driven by software, but the entire artificial intelligence platform itself is software. And so we don't need everyone to have a kind of expert level of appreciation and knowledge in software security, but we need them to have a little bit of an understanding so that we at least can start to build our resilience in cyber when it comes to software. On the screen, you can see the PCI framework, and along the left-hand side, we have our 5 key domains, and the 4th domain, the secure software lifecycle. And we've broken that down on the right-hand side into some of the key functions. And we're using the secure software lifecycle from the PCI framework as a demonstration, but you can use any of the key frameworks like NIST, for example, and they have the same kind of functions and activities in there. And if we look at some of those key activities, whether that's vulnerability detection and mitigation, secure software engineering, sensitive data protection, what we need to ask ourselves is who's actually performing these functions? Because in almost all occasions, it's not security teams, it's your IT teams, your DevOps teams. And so we're asking them to take on some security responsibilities, and therefore we have an obligation to try and help them, train them, and educate them in how best to do that. In order to achieve that, we have to first start with context. We have to speak the language, and we far too often generalize IT teams. We have to make it specific to the teams or individuals within the IT department. And if we look at developers, they often think of quality, so we look at integrity and availability. And so if we start to see security as an aspect of quality, then we start to speak a little bit more of their language. And instead of referring to things as security vulnerabilities, if we refer to them as bugs or defects, then it starts to make a little bit more sense. And if we use the analogy that was used this morning about building a house, so if we start at the very start, we need an initial concept or a design. Let's say we want a 4-bed Tudor house. You then need an architect to create the blueprints for that house. You then need your contractors to come in and start building the framework for the house. Your engineers then come in and do the electricity and the plumbing and maybe an audit on the roof to make sure that it's not leaking. And that's all before you've even moved in. And then finally, once you've moved in, you have to maintain it because inevitably, unfortunately, the heating breaks or the electrics fail. And you can see how we've mirrored that to various different IT teams in the software lifecycle. And so like you would in building a house, the training that we need to give and deliver needs to be tailored to each of those teams and functions. In order to achieve that at the start, particularly with security, we can try and build momentum first by starting with hacking. Why? Because hacking is cool, and everybody kind of gets it. And we're not trying to turn developers into hackers, but you're trying to give them little yellow jackets, so we teach them a little bit about security and start to get them thinking in that attack mentality style. And up on the screen, you can see a quote here from Molly Struve that says, "Now when I code, my first thought is, how could I hack this?" She's not a security professional, she's a site reliability engineer, but that's her first thought when she starts developing and coding. And that's kind of what we're trying to achieve, is this huge workforce in the business and the IT functions thinking about security from the start. And one of the key messages is that if your IT teams are unable to find some of those more common vulnerabilities, then the chances are they could be creating them themselves. Now, in order to do that, we recommend starting slow, starting small, focus on red, because red is cool. And you could do something like take one of the top vulnerabilities from the OWASP top 10, for example. And let's take SQL injection. And in order to try and educate and get the message across in an effective way, you can do this in a 3-stage process. So first, be giving. Give access to information that they can read up on to understand what it is you're trying to get them to learn, so SQL injection. The second is to be nasty. Show them how that thing can break the stuff that they use, so SQL injection, for example. And then finally, be open. And by that, we mean literally just have a conversation about the first 2 points and get that message across. And then the last thing you have to decide is the right medium that's correct for you. Whether it's your team or the culture that's within your organization, adapt the style to your company. And that could be, for example, at the top right, you can see a hacking day, for example. Or if that doesn't work, print stuff on T-shirts or run lunch and learns, whatever it is that might work best for you and your company. So if I go through these 3 stages, be giving, be nasty, and be open. And we start with be giving. Give them a demonstration. It could be as simple as a 2-minute video on what SQL injection is. If they don't like videos, give them cheat sheets, give them URLs, give them books. And as an example, I'm going to try and play just the first 10 seconds of a video on what SQL injection is. There might not be any sound, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to show you as a quick demonstration. So we kind of get the point. And these videos are available. They're free online. And it just gives some information on what SQL injection is that they can take in. The second option, then, is to be nasty. Give a demonstration on how this actually affects the job and the activity that they perform. Could be, again, with a hacking lunch and learn. And we have an example on the screen as well, which is also a little video that I'll walk through. And it's just a platform, a demonstration platform called Shadowbank. If I play the video, what you'll see is that Ed is trying to get access to this application. He's put his name in and he's put his password in, but unfortunately, as you can see, he's not been able to get access into the application itself. But he's just watched the video before on what SQL injection is, and he knows that there's a chance he could put some malicious code into that first name section, and any password, click enter, and he may get access into that particular software application. And as you can see, if the video goes through, there you go. He's used SQL injection to bypass the authentication and got access to the individual's account and their financial information. And that's just an example through something like Shadowbank, but you can obviously bring that to life more and use their own software and systems. Now, lastly, we have be open. And as we said, that simply just means have a conversation, create a forum for which you can have open conversations about these activities. And we try to use analogies. We saw the analogy earlier around building a house. If we take another house analogy, at the top right, let's say we want to try and get access to this particular home because it looks expensive. And we're trying to explain what escalation of privilege is. Now, we take a first look at the house, and we can't get in because there's a lock on the door, and it's fairly secure. But what we can get access to is the shed that's in the garden. So we have a look in the shed, and maybe we're lucky. Maybe there's some saws, some bolt cutters, and we might be able to use them to get into the main building. Maybe we're really lucky, and there's a set of spare keys. Or perhaps you can use a ladder to climb up to the second floor, and perhaps you're lucky and there's a window open. So that's just demonstration of escalation of privilege. And then put that into a more software application perspective and take something like a marketing website that's spin up at short notice and was done very quickly for a 30-day cashback campaign. It wasn't set up securely, it wasn't set up properly, and it was unfortunately connected to the payment system, and therefore threat actors managed to get access to that web-based application, use that escalation of privilege to get access to the financial information. If we take another example, cloud misconfiguration, we're trying to educate on what that is. If you look at the bottom left-hand side, let's say we have a very secure application, and that's demonstrated by the steel door that we can see. Let's say that we've got a very good authentication process in place, and that's demonstrated by the lock on the right-hand side. And we've embedded it and built it in a very secure infrastructure like AWS, for example, and that's demonstrated by the brick wall. But unfortunately, we've put the hinges on the wrong side of the door, and very easily, very quickly, we can get access into it. So we've misconfigured something in the application, and that's given access to it. And then finally, remember that security is like a peacock. It's a bit far-fetched, but bear with me. Let's say we've demonstrated something on SQL injection, and we've given that information. We've been giving, we've been nasty, and we've been open. The idea is that you've then started to plant ideas in individuals' minds. So they start to ask themselves, oh, maybe we should include this in our defect classification. Perhaps we should include it in our coding standards, or maybe we should use it in our testing programs. And what you've done is you've effectively got your IT teams to start taking on security responsibilities and implementing security measures without your security team even having to lift a finger. And this is the very embodiment of what the PCI framework is trying to achieve, and it is both shift left and shift right in pre-production and post-production. And I'm going to skip through those last two. And finally then, just leave you with this. Number one, remember the color wheel. Number two, be giving, be nasty, and be open. And number three, that security is like a peacock. Thank you all very much for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me afterwards, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I look forward to joining you all later. Enjoy the rest of your day.